your name and your profession.
David Fagan, solicitor and director of Bizlegal.
Now, I suppose, what is the criteria of the law when it comes to cyberbullying? What does it say, or what, do we even have any?
Well, essentially it says nothing. We don't have laws on cyberbullying per se. What we have are a range of laws which are designed for other purposes which can be used in various circumstances in some types of cyberbullying. But again, there will be types of cyberbullying where the law doesn't really have anything to say on the matter.
And how then do we go about, I suppose, if people want to go down to the route of prosecution or something like that, how do we make sure that there's something there that people can grab onto in terms of the law and the legal side of things?
Well, essentially, somebody, a lawyer presumably, looks at it to see if a law has been broken. Something that might be cyberbullying may not necessarily have broken any laws, in which case there'll be nothing to be done legally. On other occasions, a criminal offence may have been committed. There may be an assault, or there may be some other criminal offence committed, or there may be a civil wrong, a tort, such as defamation or some other type of civil case that can be brought.
And is there any chance of that changing in terms of the little legislation that it is for cyberbullying? Is there a chance of that being changed over the next couple of years?
Well, there's always a chance. There's obviously been a lot of new progressive legislation on the statute books in the last 20 years, so there's obviously every chance that the legislation will be changed, but I'm not aware of any immediate proposals to do so.
In terms of your own experience with this, have you had to deal with this in a legal sense?
Well, it's mostly the sense in which I deal with it. Obviously, as a lawyer, we do all come across bullying in other areas of our life, but by and large, we've had to deal with a number of bullying type cases. But essentially, we take them and we look at them in terms of individual breaches of the law and what can we do. So in different areas, there will be different approaches to take. In an employment area, for instance, bullying may feed into some of the unfair dismissal type legislation or some of the other employment protection legislation. In the child protection area, it may be prosecuted or looked at under the Children Act, for instance. So depending on the type of bullying and the sphere in which it occurs, there may be a different law to be applied.
And is there a need for a cyberbullying specific law, do you think?
It would have an advantage in that it would, if it was done properly, it would encapsulate all types of cyberbullying and not just be ad hoc solutions to some different types of bullying. It would presumably present itself across the entire piece. And then you might find that some of the cases that are currently brought for bullying type cases would no longer be brought because the most appropriate law would be the law designed for it rather than laws designed for something else.
And in terms of the, I suppose, getting people prosecuted, how hard or how easy is it to actually get somebody prosecuted for this?
It's very difficult. If you think of it from the point of view of, say, the Gardaí, they don't really want to be prosecuting anything but the most severe of cases because the law isn't really designed for it, and it's only if there's a clear breach of the law that they will take action. They will often ask the parties to see if they can resolve the matters rather than bringing the prosecution.
So is it a case that it's simply just not being taken as seriously as it should be?
Yes, essentially.
So what do we do in terms of that? Is it about educating people and people like you in your own profession and getting, I suppose, notice out there that this is a very serious thing, it's a very serious crime and should be dealt with in a serious way?
I think there's plenty of education out there. I mean, there are a couple of different things that have to happen in tackling bullying. The law is only one portion of it. In fact, I would suggest that the law is the lesser portion of it. The most important thing is to try and prevent it, then to try and deal with it emotionally and socially when it does happen. And prosecutions and the law are only really a small part of that. It's a social problem which has social solutions. But having said that, while there is quite a deal of work on those social problems, information in schools, training for teachers, and for other persons who will encounter bullying in their working lives, there's very little focus on the actual law itself. So what's actually required is a straightforward, blunt change in the law. What we need is legislation.
And of course, what people put online, of course, and what they say is data as well. So where does data protection come in anywhere in terms of the cyberbullying aspect of things?
Well, in the same way as other aspects of bullying and cyberbullying sometimes touch across areas of law which make them an offence. Similarly, the misuse of data can be an offence. So if data is being misused in the course of the cyberbullying, then an offence may be committed. However, data which is used only for personal, family, recreational type purposes does not come under the Data Protection Acts. So in many ways, because it's not because the legislation is not aimed at regulating individuals, but is rather aimed at regulating companies or organizations, there is not much of a focus on the individual use of data.
Is it a fact that they simply don't understand or take seriously the aspect of cyberbullying? Because it seems as if there's laws out there that are very general in terms of data and cyberbullying and bullying, etc. But there's nothing that says specifically in a statute online cyberbullying, etc. And that they're just simply not taking it seriously. It can't be done.
Well, actually, there aren't laws out there that are very general in relation to bullying. That's kind of the point. There are laws which are very specific to specific offences, such as assault or civil wrongs, say, such as defamation, or breaches of statutes, such as data protection, or the legislation relating to misuse of another's data, and so on and so forth. In many ways, what we have is a patchwork quilt of specific laws designed for other purposes. What we actually need is a general law on bullying/cyberbullying with a specific definition of what that actually is and what the offences for breach of the legislation would be. That's what we need.
And that was going to be my final question on this, which was if a minister turned around to you and said, I want you to write this legislation, this law for me, what would you do?
I would define the offence precisely. I would make it wide enough to capture all of the currently understood forms of bullying and cyberbullying. I would set out appropriate punishments for those breaches. I would make it age appropriate because this is a behaviour that spans age ranges, unlike many types of legislation which is aimed only at adults. And then I would ensure that I review the legislation very shortly after it came into force to make sure it was working and that it was practical.